Salmon aquaculture is the industrial production of salmon from egg to market in a net cage, pond, or contained system. Most of the industry still uses open net cages in the ocean, and these floating feedlots hold up to 1 million fish in an area the size of 2 football fields. The open net cages are usually sited in sheltered bays along the coast in close proximity to wild salmon streams and rivers, according to the Coastal Alliance for Aquaculture Reform. What do you think about when someone mentions salmon farming?
I think of the nets, the pens, the concentration of fish that's in these pens, what's being fed to these fish, and just the general conditions that the fish are living under.
Do you agree with the way that salmon are being raised?
We've seen farms that have extremely high pen densities where the fish are jammed in there and they're very susceptible to diseases. We've also seen farms where the pen densities are very low.
Are you for or against salmon farming?
Some people are doing things in better ways than others. If I had to make a broad, blanket statement, I would say I'm against the way the salmon farming is being done. Using 2 to 3 pounds of protein to make 1 pound of protein is not a sustainable way of continuing to do business.
What are some advantages and disadvantages?
The benefit of salmon farming is job creation. As salmon farming expands and more farms are created, more jobs will in turn be created. And this not only helps the world economy, this will also help local economies.
Advantages are we need aquaculture in order to feed the world. There's simply not enough wild fish out there to feed everybody. With that being is people are more inclined to put as much salmon into the pens as they can to get as much profit out of a single area. If we continue to do things in the way we have in terms of putting as much salmon into one pen as we are, then we're going to have issues down the road.
What are some major environmental issues?
Waste from these fish or the food supply that we need for these fish. When you put 5 to 10 fish in a cubic meter and then you just have all the waste from those fish and then you multiply that times millions and millions of fish in a single area, nature can handle the waste of a fish. If nature cannot handle the density of the fish that's being put on it. So it can't break down that.
The issue with salmon farming is the quality of the salmon that's being produced. It is of lesser quality than wild salmon, and this could hurt the consumer. The consumer may recognize this, and the demand for farm salmon could decrease, and the demand for substitutes or wild salmon would in turn increase.
Are consumers aware of these issues?
I think they're aware. I think it might not be PCBs in general. They think they're aware that there might be contaminants in fish that they have to be concerned about. They hear about mercury in fish all the time. That again goes back to the diet that they're fed and the conditions that they're raised under. A fish that's being fed a vegetarian diet is not going to have PCB concerns that a fish that's being fed a protein diet is.
The Oceans Alert Organization states that polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, are toxic chemicals that have been absorbed into the soil and run off into the water. Salmon swim in waters polluted with PCBs and absorb the toxin into their fatty tissue. The greatest risk for public exposure is through eating this toxic fish. If the public was more aware of the issues going on, do you think it would affect the farming industry?
I don't think so. Salmon is just something that people get. They want to go out and they want to get seafood. They're going to order those items regardless. Yeah. I mean, people go out and they smoke cigarettes every day, even though we tell them the health concerns. I don't think they're going to be scared off by hearing about, PCBs or something like that in salmon. Am I concerned about that in my fish? Yes, but I also look at it this way: the amount of fish that I have in my diet isn't really going to impact me in terms of there is some elevated PCB levels.
With these genetically modified fish, is there a serious threat of the salmon escaping?
Definitely a concern. Once these fish, and especially as people are looking at genetically modified fish and things like that, these fish getting out into the wild environment is one, it's causing concerns about mixing with native species and wild species. Two, they're going to be out competing for food. These are fish that are used to eating voraciously because they're raised so fast and they're fed so quickly and they're genetically modified to grow quickly. If you put them out in the natural environment where they're competing against a native fish that's not growing as quickly, they're going to get out. They're going to be outcompeted.
Do the economic benefits outweigh the cost of environmental harm?
I see the economic benefits to this. It's a big industry. There's lots of jobs created. There's lots of people fed. Like I said before, we're going to need aquaculture in order to feed the amount of people that we have in this world. There's no question about that. The negative impacts from the environment can't continue either. This is something that if we continue to expand and people continue to eat more seafood and the population of the world continues to increase, we're going to have to increase salmon farming. But you can't increase it if you're doing negative environmental impacts. We need to figure out a way that we can increase salmon farming, but at the same time reduce those environmental impacts. And people are looking at this. There's closed circuit systems that are being done for salmon. There's onshore systems. There's people looking at vegetarian diets for fish. It is possible to do aquaculture in a clean way, and we just have to get the general public to understand and possibly get on board with this whole movement and get them buying those fish that are raised in a more sustainable way. And I think now is definitely the time to have that happen, and people are starting to do that.
As the population of the world continues to grow at a substantial rate, the demand for commodities such as salmon will increase. According to Canadian Aquaculture Industry Alliance, the global demand for fish will reach approximately 150 to 160 million tons by 2030. If you take a look at the world production of fish, as shown on the graph, captured fisheries are only estimated to provide 80 to 100 million tons per year on a sustainable basis. Without aquaculture, a global shortfall of approximately 50 to 80 million tons of fish and seafood is projected. It is estimated that future manufacturers promoting salmon farming will help the production process. Salmon aquaculture is becoming an important contributing factor to the improvement of the global economy. One of the economic benefits of salmon farming is that the industry has generated an increase in the supply of salmon. The Journal of Aquaculture and Environmental Ethics gives an explanation on how aquaculture is the #1 fastest growing animal producing sector in the world and is expected to play an important role in global food supply.
And we're going to need aquaculture. Some things we might need to look at in the future is 3D farming. Using kelp and using shellfish and making an ecosystem right there in the pens in order to actually facilitate the breaking down of the waste and the feeding of these fish. 3D farming is starting to make, not in salmon, but it's starting to make its way into the aquaculture world. In southwest Connecticut, Thimble Island oysters, he's doing 3D oyster farming. He's doing clams in the sand, then oysters in a cage above them, and then kelp above them. So he's looking at different ways that we can use a single area to produce multiple food sources.
Salmon farming can also help alleviate the growing demand for food worldwide. As the demand for food increases, the demand for salmon will also increase. Salmon farming offers a cheap and fast way of growing food, and this will help alleviate the increasing demand for food worldwide.
The salmon farming production process can promote sustainability and allow producers to keep up with increasing consumer demands in a competitive market.